Part 1. The Village, the Graveyard, and the Farmer Inn. A small, snow-covered village in Denmark. There stood an old farm with dying fields and a house that seemed too lonely for life. That house belonged to Erik Johansson, an aging farmer with a face carved by years of labor and eyes heavy with weariness. Erik lived alone. His wife had died many winters ago, and his children had left for the city, never to return. All he had left was his land, his animals, and the heavy silence of his house. But what made Erik's home most unsettling was not the silence inside, but the graveyard across the road. The villagers called it Vestre Kirkegård. It was one of the oldest cemeteries in the region, so ancient that no one remembered when the first body was buried there. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the place. The dead there do not rest. Not truly. At night, the graveyard is no place for the living. When the sun fell, no villager dared walk past those gates. Doors were bolted, curtains drawn. Prayers whispered into the cold night air. Only Erik stayed there, tending his farm, living in defiance of the fear that gripped everyone else. Part 2. The first strange sound. It was a night in December. Snow fell thick and heavy, smothering the village in a blanket of white. The cold was sharp, biting, and the moon hid behind clouds. Erik had just finished feeding his animals in the barn. Carrying a lantern, he trudged back toward his house, boots crunching in the snow. Then he heard it. Skrr, grr, the sound of dirt being scraped, of soil being dug. He stopped, frowning. Perhaps it was a fox or a wolf digging for food. But the sound grew louder, and with it faint muffled groans. The old farmer froze. Slowly he turned his lantern toward the graveyard. His breath caught one of the graves. It was moving. The soil upon it shifted, rising and falling as though something beneath clawed its way upward. His heart thundered in his chest. Erik stumbled backward, then turned and rushed inside his house, bolting the door shut behind him. That night, he did not sleep. His mind replayed the sound over and over again. Skr. Skr. Part 3. The voices. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same sound. The scratching of soil, the faint moans. But this time, Erik heard something more. He pressed his ear to the frosted window, straining. Erik. Erik. His blood ran cold. The grave was calling his name. Part 4. The villagers. The following morning, Erik marched to the village square and told the others what he had seen. The villagers paled. An old woman crossed herself and muttered, "You must leave that house, Erik. That ground is cursed. Many before you tried living there, and none of them lasted." Another villager whispered, "Centuries ago, a woman was buried alive in that cemetery. Her name was Freja. They say her spirit has never rested. She calls to those who live nearby. She drags them into the earth." Erik clenched his jaw. "This is my farm, my land. I won't abandon it because of ghost stories." But deep inside, doubt gnawed at him. Part 5. The first encounter. That night, Erik decided to face it. He would not cower inside his home like a frightened child. He lit his lantern, pulled his heavy coat tight, and stepped into the fog-drenched graveyard. The cold was sharp enough to sting his skin. The fog was so dense he could barely see his own hands. The silence was unnatural, thick, heavy, waiting. And then the ground trembled. The grave he had seen before shifted again, soil rising in uneven pulses. Suddenly his lantern flickered, then went out. Darkness swallowed him, and then he saw it, a shape, pale figure, tall, thin, draped in shadows. A woman. Her face was ghostly white, her eyes hollow black voids like empty sockets. She drifted closer. Her voice was a whisper, but it cut through him like a knife. "Why do you live in my home?" Erik's legs trembled. He stumbled back, but the earth beneath his boots felt soft, pulling, dragging him down as if invisible hands clawed at his ankles. With a desperate cry, he tore himself free and ran. He slammed his door shut, panting, his lantern shattered in the snow behind him. That was the night Erik knew. This was no fox, no wolf, no trick of the wind. This was something far older, far hungrier. Part 6. Shadows in the fog. The nights grew longer, darker, and colder. Erik tried to convince himself it had been a dream, or a trick of his tired mind. But each evening, as the clock crept closer to midnight, the fear grew inside him like a sickness. He began to notice things around his farm. His chickens refused to roost at night, clucking and screeching until dawn. The cows stamped and kicked their stalls, their wide eyes fixed on the graveyard across the road. Even his dog, old and loyal, now whined endlessly, refusing to leave the corner near the hearth. One morning, Erik found claw marks on the barn door. Deep, jagged gouges, too large for any fox or wolf. The wood looked as though it had been torn by fingernails. Human fingernails, and always, always at night. The whisper came, "Erik, Erik." Part 7, the past unearthed, desperate for answers. Erik sought out the village's oldest resident, a hunched old woman named Marta, who was said to know every dark tale of their land. He found her sitting by her fireplace, knitting with trembling hands. When Erik told her about the grave, about the voice that called his name, her face turned pale. "I warned you," she whispered. "That grave is hers. Freya's grave." Erik leaned closer. Who was Freya? Marta's voice dropped to a hushed rasp. Freya was accused of witchcraft centuries ago. They said she cursed the harvest, brought sickness to the cattle, and spoke to the dead. The villagers feared her. They bound her, gagged her, and buried her alive in that very grave. She screamed for hours, days, until the earth silenced her. But her spirit never left. Every soul that dared to live near her resting place, she claimed them. One by one, Erik's skin crawled. He wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as superstition. But deep inside, he remembered the face in the fog, the voice whispering his name. "Why me?" he asked almost in a whisper. Marta's eyes, clouded with age, fixed on him. "Because you live on her land. To her, you already belong to the grave." Part 8, the unraveling. The days that followed grew worse. Erik stopped sleeping. Every night he heard footsteps outside his house, crunching in the snow, circling his walls. Sometimes he woke to the sound of fingernails scratching his window. Other times he swore he heard a woman humming an old lullaby, drifting from the cemetery into his very bedroom. He tried to shut it out, to drown it with ale, with work, with anything, but nothing silenced the voice. "Erik, come home." His animals began to vanish. First the hens, then a cow. He searched the woods, the fields, but found only trails leading back to the graveyard. No blood, no bodies, just empty stalls and silence. The villagers whispered behind his back. Some pitied him, others feared he had already been marked. Children threw stones at his fence and ran, shouting, "The grave has chosen you, Erik." And still, Erik refused to leave. Part 9. The lantern in the dark one night. Erik sat with his shotgun across his knees, staring at the door. His dog whimpered by the fire, its ears twitching. Then, the knock, 3 slow, heavy knocks, thud. Thud, thud, Erik's breath caught. No one in the village would dare come here at night. He rose, lantern in one hand, shotgun in the other. He opened the door and found nothing, only fog. But in the snow just at the edge of the lantern's glow were footprints, bare feet, small, feminine, leading from his doorstep, back toward the graveyard. Part 10, the decision the next morning. Erik's resolve broke. He couldn't take it anymore. He told himself if he dug up the grave, if he saw with his own eyes what lay beneath, maybe it would end. Maybe he could destroy whatever haunted him. That night, with shovel in hand, he crossed the road. The fog clung to him like wet cloth, muffling every sound. The grave was waiting. The soil looked freshly turned, though no one had touched it in centuries. He began to dig. The ground was frozen, hard, but as he shoveled deeper, the soil grew strangely soft, almost as if it wanted to be moved. His heart pounded in his ears. He dug faster, and then his shovel struck something. Wood, a coffin. Erik dropped to his knees and clawed at the dirt with his hands until the rotting lid was visible. With a trembling breath, he pried it open. Inside lay a skeleton, dressed in tattered remnants of cloth, but around its skull, strands of hair clung like dried weeds. Its mouth was open, frozen in an eternal scream. And then, its hollow sockets turned. It looked at him. Erik. The sound came not from the ground, not from the air, but from inside his skull, a whisper that burned. The skeleton's arms twitched, bones creaked, fingers curled, reaching. Erik stumbled back, screaming. The ground beneath him opened. Cold hands seized his ankles. Soil pulled at him, clawing, dragging him toward the grave. He thrashed, kicked, clawed at the dirt, but the pull was relentless. The last thing he saw before the earth swallowed him was the hollow face of Freja, her jaw splitting into a ghastly grin. Part 11. The Vanishing. That night, when Erik did not return to his house, the village grew restless. Some claimed they had heard his screams echoing faintly across the frozen fields. Others swore they saw lantern light flickering deep in the graveyard fog, bobbing and sinking until it disappeared. By morning, his door still hung open, snow drifting inside. His shotgun lay by the hearth unfired. His dog was gone. The barn was silent, the stalls empty. The villagers whispered among themselves, but none dared cross the road to look for him. Not in daylight, not ever. Part 12. The silent farm days turned to weeks. Erik's farm lay abandoned. Snow piled upon the roof. The fences creaked in the wind. At night, smoke no longer rose from the chimney, but still, the villagers heard things. Children, in the still hours before dawn, claimed to see a lantern swinging back and forth in the fog, moving slowly across the fields. Dogs howled through the night, hackles raised toward Erik's house. One farmer swore he saw a figure plowing the fields at dusk, a tall man in a heavy coat, moving in slow, mechanical motions. But when he blinked, the figure was gone and the soil was untouched. Part 13. The New Gravestone. One bitter morning. A group of woodcutters passing the graveyard froze in their tracks. There, among the ancient stones, stood a new headstone. Its surface was clean, unweathered, as though carved only days before. It bore a single name, Erik Johansson, 1856. The villagers stared, pale and silent. No mason had been called. No one had cut the stone, and yet it stood there, heavy and real. "The grave has taken him," Marta whispered, "and it will take more if anyone dares to stay." Part 14. The curse continues. From then on, no one bought Erik's farm. The land remained empty, the house rotting into the earth. Travelers who passed by said they felt watched, as though unseen eyes followed them from the fog. Some claimed they heard knocking, 3 slow knocks, coming from beneath the soil. Others heard a woman's voice humming a lullaby, drifting through the graveyard like smoke. And sometimes, on the coldest nights, villagers swore they heard a man's voice too, a hoarse whisper carried on the wind. "Help me. Please, I'm not dead." Part 15. Epilogue. Generations later, the graveyard still stands. The farm is long gone, reduced to rubble and weeds, but the villagers still warn their children. Never go near the graveyard after dark. Never follow the lights, and never answer if you hear your name whispered in the fog. Because Freja still waits beneath the soil. And now Erik waits with her. 2 restless spirits hungry for the living, and the grave is never full. Final narration line for dramatic ending. Some graves are not meant to be disturbed, and some names should never be answered.